What's up gamers, don't mind me, but today I'm going to be reviving a dead franchise. First we start with a franchise that everyone acts like they support despite never playing one of its games. First we start with some Dark Souls elements because everyone seems to like that nowadays. Then we add a little bit of horror that's going to raise your heart rate to an unhealthy amount. And boom. Sounds about right.
Metroid Dread is one of, if not the strangest piece of game development history. A game that has been rumored to be in development for over 15 years, while being cancelled, uncancelled, and then cancelled again. It started all the way back in E3 of 2005, where Reggie had been showing off some upcoming DS games, with Metroid Dread missing despite being shown off to game journalists on an upcoming product sheet prior. This means that somewhere in between this and the presentation, Nintendo decided to cut the game in order to show it off later. Game Informer clearly didn't get the memo, as they ended up including it on a list of upcoming DS games in their magazine. Fan speculation obviously started as to what this mysterious new Metroid game was gonna be, with other sources adding on to the hype. This version of the game was eventually dropped by the producer of Metroid Dread, Yoshio Sakamoto, as he felt that the technology just wasn't advanced enough in order to make the game that they wanted. Which, of course it isn't, dude. You're dealing with the DS here. The hype started again in 2007, as in Metroid Prime 3, you're able to find a lore panel that states Metroid Project Dread is nearing the final stages of completion. This clearly seemed to hint at Metroid Dread's release coming up, but the senior producer Brian Walker and director Mark Pacini described it as just a coincidence. I partially doubt this, as you would think that Nintendo would be double checking all pieces of info put into the game, and that the staff of Retro Studios would be aware of Metroid Dread being cancelled a while back. My best guess is that it could have been a developer referencing the situation in order to poke some fun out of the fanbase. Metroid just kind of died off after this in general, until Mercury Steam had approached Nintendo about a first-person Metroid game for Wii U. Mercury Steam before this had developed the Castlevania Lords of Shadow games. This pitch, with the help of Yoshio Sakamoto, eventually went from a remake of Metroid Fusion to a remake of Metroid 2, of course ending up with Metroid Samus Returns for 3DS and the new team of Mercury Steam to develop all future 2D Metroid games. Metroid Dread would triumphantly return by being revealed at E3 of 2021, with the game releasing on October 8th, 2021. Metroid Dread starts with a recap of the last games, which works, I guess. I wish there was a bit more context given, considering that the game is the first 2D one in over 20 years, meaning that for a lot of people, including me, this is our first Metroid game. I don't know how to feel about it, as I was pretty confused during this sequence and a few later parts in the game, but you don't seriously need more than what's already given. Also, I'm going to be talking about spoilers for the game's story. The game itself starts with Samus headed to the planet of ZDR after being sent a video of the X-Parasite, the main enemy of Metroid Fusion. Someone clearly didn't do their job last time. Powerful robots known as the E.M.M.I, or E.M.M.I for short, were sent to hunt it down but went offline. I'll talk more about them later. Upon arriving on the planet, Samus fights a strange member of the Chozo species, with their name later revealed to be Ravenbeak, the main villain of this story. The Chozo are a reoccurring species within the Metroid franchise, with them being behind most major plot points and elements of the series. In typical Metroid fashion, Samus ends up losing all of her abilities after this fight, and then you're forced to find them in order to leave the planet while discovering who that was and what's up with the X-Parasite being back. A pretty typical Metroid plot from what I've seen of the other games. Throughout the game, you'll be going through 8 different major locations, with a 9th being where the final boss is. I both love and hate how they all look, as when compared to each other, you can certainly see unique elements between them. For example, Gavorian is an underground forest, Barinia is a research site built around the ocean, and Cataris is a volcanic area. But I wish there was more variety within the areas themselves, as each room felt generic to their area stereotypes, and with the Metroidvania, it makes it quite bland to progress when you feel like you've already been in that room before, even if you haven't. I get that it makes the areas feel more interconnected, but at least some big set pieces to remember them by would be nice. But even some of the separate areas elements mixed together, with the most most blaring being between Elon and Farinia, both looking like temples for the Chozo, with not much to differentiate them from each other. Something that I have to hand to the map design is that it never feels too confusing nor linear. I rarely found myself getting lost when finding what I'm supposed to do next, and even when I did, it rarely took me more than 5 minutes to have that oh moment where I realized what exactly I was overlooking the whole time. The great part about this is that it never directly guides you to where to go next, while Metroid Fusion in this case would come in and say, no, nah, come on, you're too stupid to play this game. Let me hold your hand for you. No, I am holding your hand, okay? You got it? Or at least I think. All I'm going off of is other people's opinions for that one, as I haven't played Metroid Fusion for myself, but I plan to soon. Anyways, I love how the game makes you feel smart for finding where to go next, while hiding little elements to help block off where you could get lost, in order to help further guide you. One of my main worries going into the game was this exact problem, where when I tried it a little back, I got lost before I even took down the second E.M.M.I, but I don't know if it was me simply paying more attention or what, but I never had that problem this time. The basic move list is the simple stuff again, blaster and rockets, but I will get to the upgrades in a little bit. The biggest contribution to the basic gameplay that Dread makes has to be the parry system. This system was of course first introduced to Samus Returns, but I feel like this is where it can truly shine, as it's no longer tied down to a remake, and I hate it. Now before you grab the pitchforks and torches, hear me out. I hate the overuse of the mechanic, as it's the be-all and end-all to most basic enemies, and if you don't use it, you're stuck just having to spam your blaster over and over to defeat them. I hate how quick the alert for the parry comes out, as for someone who doesn't have great eyesight, a quick reaction time, or someone that just doesn't sit close to their TV, it can be quite hard to notice. Now, this might seem like I'm just complaining over simple things, but at least with something like the FromSoft games that have parryable attacks, the enemies telegraph them so much better, rather than just a quick flash. While of course all basic enemy attacks will be parryable, it still takes quite a while to get the timing down for each and every enemy, and by the time you do get it down, it's easier to just use a different move or run past the enemy. The bosses are also a huge factor for why I hate this mechanic, as they only have certain attacks that are parryable. Which you might think, duh, of course, that's so it isn't just a cakewalk for you. It becomes incredibly hard to tell when a parryable attack is coming at you, when you have to be constantly ready to move in order to not get hit and die. Though you have to be parrying in order to ensure that you aren't spending forever on the boss. The quick time events are probably the best use of the mechanic, which is something I never expected myself to say. They at least better show off when an attack is coming, while making the fight cooler and more interactive. Overall, I wish they did better, but I feel like that this might have been a Doom Eternal Marauder situation where I warm up to the mechanic over time. Other than my problem with parrying, the enemies are pretty cool with some sick designs. I love the bulky ones that shoot beams and you're able to slide under them. My only real complaint with the basic enemies is that some of them feel a little too overused, but that isn't a serious issue, and partway through the story the X-Parasite gets introduced by taking over all the enemies, which really doesn't add much to the gameplay itself other than some enemies coming back from the dead and you have to manually collect the health and missiles from them. My favorite enemy is the E.M.M.I, despite me having a love-hate relationship with them. You see, you're unable to directly attack them. Instead, you have to hide and maneuver around them until you finally kill this mother brain looking enemy, where you gain a powerful blaster that you chip off their mask with and then blast them in the face. This gives you such a great feeling as you finally kill this thing that has been a pain in your side while you've just been trying to explore. I also love the horror elements of being chased down by an unstoppable foe. It's something I can only compare to Breath of the Wild and its Guardians. This all sounds great in theory, but in my opinion, it falls apart badly in practice. Due to the fight or flight nature of the mechanic, it causes you to want to quickly find an exit even before the thing spots you. But this is Metroid you're dealing with, confusing exits while panicking. You can't map your way out either, as the game only keeps your map that you made when you reach a save point, so it just delves into a lot of frustration and running around while a robot chases you. This gets even more annoying later on, as the robots get better than before, where they can now shoot things to slow you down and see through walls, meaning that you'll get seen no matter what you do. fun. Or with the sections during water, you get slowed down to a snail's pace when platforming, leading to even more deaths. I love the concept of the E.M.M.Is, but the whole experience of dealing with them can be summed up to slamming your head against a brick wall and hoping that the wall breaks first. Oh, and the only way to counter them is to parry when they catch you, which feels so inconsistent with the timing, leading to me just getting lucky with it when it randomly works, so you can probably guess how I feel about the parrying. The benefit of dealing with the E.M.M.I is that they reward you with some new abilities, though don't worry, the Chozo statues are still present as well. Of course, we have returning abilities like the Screw Attack, Morph Ball Bomb, Grapple Beam, etc. Though the new abilities for the series are great as well, with the Flash Shift teleporting you, which helps for dealing with enemies and platforming. The Phantom Cloak turns you invisible for a small time, which can help lighten the experience of the E.M.M.Is, though it doesn't work if they've already spotted you. And the Spider Magnet, which I'm surprised wasn't always in the Metroid series, due to its great use in platforming. Abilities or not though, I love how the movement feels in the game. My favorite parts of the experience had to be zooming through rooms and around enemies as fast as possible, which is great for the Metroid series, as in the past it has rewarded players for completing the game as fast as possible, which is no different here, though I'll get into that later. I also want to mention how much I love the 3 suit designs in the game, with them being the Power, Varia, and Gravity suits, with the 4th one being used during the final boss, but I'll get into that later. The Power suit is the only fully new suit and is the main one being used in the marketing, and for good reason. I love the color mixture of red, light blue, and white, with it feeling like the suits of the past while looking towards the future. The Varia suit is something you might recognize for its alternate look, being the most iconic suit for Samus. Out of the 3, I dislike this one the most, which doesn't make it bad, it still certainly looks good, but the others do better. I feel like they should have gone with the iconic Varia suit or something entirely original, not this half and half. My overall favorite has got to be the Gravity suit, as just look at it. The mix of dark purple with the red and white looks so good somehow. The only thing that could have made it better is if they made the visor and suit lights blue like the original. The bosses have some great designs, with only the Chozo soldiers being repeated throughout the game, which means more unique fights and designs. Of course, you have your smaller bosses that are smaller enemies beefed up, like Escu, which is a lightning bug, or Golzuna, which is a shape-shifting crab thing. A highlight out of these smaller bosses would be the Chozo soldiers for sure, as they serve as a nice challenge and end with a nice QuickTime event sequence. The bigger bosses are great too, as they have some interesting concepts, like Kraid, who returns from earlier games within the series like Super Metroid, Dragia, which is a neat underwater monster fight, and Experiment Z57, that has my favorite design due to it being mutated by the X-Parasite. Though the bosses aren't without their flaws, as the bigger ones just end up feeling like you're stuck spamming the Y button rather than actually fighting a huge monster. Of course, parrying can help to quicken the process, but I already explained how that just doesn't mesh well with the bosses. The few parryable attacks just feel like they come out of nowhere, and you're in the mindset of a boss fight, so you focus on dodging rather than parrying. The difficulty spike is huge on these larger boss fights. At least with the smaller ones, they feel like a decent challenge, instead of them just repeatedly sucker punching you in the chest. This is partially because of some of the bullshit moves that the bosses do, especially Experiment Z57. Didn't know we were allowed to do Flappy Bird while pushing me back with a fan, or this claw attack during phase 2, where even if I'm in the safe zone, I get hit somehow. But this could all be excused if the game didn't spit on my corpse every time I died by forcing me to manually re-enter the boss fight and skip the cutscene, instead of just spawning me into it automatically and giving me the option to leave if I wanted to explore for more items. The final boss against Ravenbeak is something else entirely, as it puts the other difficulty spikes to shame. It starts with this long thing about how Samus is technically his daughter due to him giving some DNA to her in the past, but he pledges to make an army of Samuses in order to take over the universe or galaxy. Typical villain stuff, and Samus is understandably pissed. The game then swings you into the fight where you need to parry in order to progress through the first and last stages of the fight, but to be honest, That was the easiest part of the boss fight. Non-stop quick attacks with some like the black hole requiring you to charge your missiles or get hit, but Beak doesn't stop while you do this. He leads you in with lasers just to claw at you. A whole mess for this first phase. But the second phase must have been something developed by Nintendo just to be a big fuck you to all the impatient fans. He grows wings and launches toward you with the occasional laser beam from his blaster, which might seem easy enough, but one move brings everything crashing down. He has this missile attack that follows you non-stop, that forces you to jump around Beak, but considering he's in the air and my jumps don't want to seem to work all of a sudden, it leads into a bunch of bullshit hits. Though it can't just stop there, as he has to combine the missiles with every other move one after another with no time to breathe, or else you'll lose time that you need to be using in order to fire the 60 missiles required to beat this phase. If you ever beat this, you thankfully get rewarded with a cutscene with no QuickTime events, of Samus tearing off one of his wings. The third phase is thankfully a bit basic like the first, as it returns to the ground with a few newer moves. The whole experience can be summed up to the game saying, nope, you've had your fun. Now we show you some real shit. What the fuck? God damn it. Seriously? Ah! I understand why Nintendo made the game teens and up now, because no way in hell is anyone younger ever beating this shit. The final sequence at least makes all of the frustration worth it, with the game ending like an anime, Samus screaming and all. I don't know if the scene was supposed to be funny or serious, as Samus is supposed to be fully tapping into her Metroid DNA in order to destroy an X-Parasite infected Beak. But then I see this face every once in a while during the cutscene and start to burst out laughing. The Metroid suit shown off here is also really cool looking, making it look more alien rather than futuristic. The final run to the ship is also a great climactic end to the game, which reintroduces that feeling of fight or flight shown off in the E.M.M.I sections. The collectibles in this game are quite simple. Of course, you have all your missile and health expansions that get you 100% on your save file, but upon getting everything in each area, you gain a piece in the gallery for the Chozo archives, depicting the Chozo tribes on ZDR before the events of Dread. Along with that, you gain a cool picture of Samus in her classic suit in front of some of the villains in the series, which gets unlocked for all areas being completed or 100% in general. Though, just like its predecessor, the game awards you for going fast, and this time with images depicting all 5 2D Metroid games and other M for some reason. In order to unlock all of them, you need to beat both normal and hard mode in under 4 hours, with an alternate to the picture of Samus in her Varia suit, with her instead being in her Zero suit if you unlock all of them. While I did get all the Chozo archive images, I was sadly unable to get all time-based rewards due to my lack of time at the moment to keep playing through the game over and over, though I'm not opposed to returning to the game after a while in order to collect these rewards. I also briefly mentioned normal and hard mode, though in a post-game update, Rookie and Dread modes were added. Rookie is what you expect, an easier version of the game, but Dread is where Samus dies in one hit, no matter what it is. Thankfully you still save as normal and you aren't limited to one life, but that in no way makes this easier. I think this is quite cool as like an opposite of Doom Eternal's Ultra Nightmare or Hollow Knight's Steel Soul, where in those you only have one life. I'm scared for the day that I eventually force myself to do this. Apart from those, we also have a boss rush mode, with alternate difficulties as well, with the non-typical ones being one life and a dread mode for the boss rush. Metroid Dread is a miracle that it finally came out, but I can't just blindly recommend this game when it has so many flaws. The game is hard, really hard, which I'm told is a staple of the Metroid series, but even though you have infinite lives, I felt like I was gonna run out of them due to how much I was dying. The game has some great moments while you're exploring and running past enemies, but when you hit that brick wall that is the E.M.M.Is or bosses, it can make you want to drop the game. And that feeling of finally beating that boss or section just isn't equal to the work you put into it, as compared to something like Dark Souls or Hollow Knight. Speaking about Hollow Knight, the prices and time you might spend playing is something to consider. While you might spend 10 hours on your first playthrough and 50 if you're replaying the game in order to see everything and get the full experience for Metroid Dread, which is $60, and Hollow Knight you're able to spend a fourth of that for 50 hours just on your first playthrough, and 130 hours to get the full experience. Of course, time played and money spent don't equal enjoyment for a game. It's still something to consider, especially if you have to pick and choose which games to buy.
So, would I recommend Metroid Dread? If you like Metroidvanias, then yes, absolutely, you need to pick this game up and play it. And let's be honest, you already have. But if you're like me and have only tried 1 or 2 Metroidvanias, hell, even none, but you're still looking at Metroid Dread, then I'd pass on it for now and try out a cheaper option like Hollow Knight. And if you like that or are still wanting Metroid Dread, then try it out after that. I wonder what else I can revive. Let's give Banjo-Kazooie a full remake treatment like Crash and Spyro. How the hell did I get burnt popcorn? This thing's only meant for dead franchises. Huh, I guess some things are never meant to be.